Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the OE, a weekly Call of Duty Esports show where we take a glimpse at all of the events that happened in the last week and we look forward to what lies ahead. On today's show, I'm going to give you my power rankings. I'm going to give you a list of who I thought were the top 5 performers from the very first major. I'm going to answer your questions from Twitter. We're going to dive into FaZe Search and Destroy inside the film room, and I'll go through, tell you guys why I think they're so good at Search and Destroy, and there's a whole list of other topics we're going to cover today. So go ahead, get comfortable, and let's dive into our first topic. Okay, so very first thing today, I want to take a peek at some of these matches that I think I didn't want to go through like 20 matches. I just wanted to cover matches that I thought had a really big impact on the tournament overall. And the first one that I wanted to point out was this match between Toronto and Minnesota, because I really thought going into this tournament that Minnesota was going to make a lot of waves down through that losers bracket. I thought they started off with Toronto, which is a team that, yes, they played in the very first kickoff weekend and they took them to map 5 and whatever. They struggled a little bit, but I thought with how good they are at Search and Destroy and how they're a top 5 control team in the game, I just figured they had a recipe for success heading into the weekend, and Toronto came out and they clutched up in the Search and Destroy. Ultimately, they ended up beating Minnesota at their own game. And I personally think that for those teams that did drop down into the losers bracket, I thought that this was probably a little bit of a sigh of relief because they are so good at Search and Destroy. You just never know, right? If you go into a match against Minnesota and they're so good at Search, that's basically 2 of the 5 maps, and you just have to be on top of your game in the respawns in order to beat them. But as Toronto showed us, that's not quite how it went this weekend. So I thought that this was a big upset for Toronto. Even though Toronto didn't end up going much further, I thought getting Minnesota out of the tournament definitely played out well for a lot of the other teams that dropped down into the losers bracket. Second match to digest. What do you say about this one? And this is the second one. I know they played in winners round 1 and Optic got a 3-0 victory in that matchup, but the second one that we're talking about is this one here, where New York earned a 3-0 later on in the elimination bracket. And basically, they just eliminated Optic Chicago from the tournament. And if you haven't seen, I did a breakdown of this control. It was like an hour or so after this match was played. If you haven't seen that, go take a peek at it. It's a video on demand on my channel, because this is one of the biggest breakdowns that I think I've ever seen. There were 3 or 4 different times where I paused the video and I could not believe the mental errors and the mental breakdown that I was seeing from a team like Optic. I get the fact that they had a life advantage in this control, and they were really just ultimately trying to play Search and Destroy, get a couple people dead, we'll have numbers, then we can go ahead and we can cap B, but it just didn't end up working out for them, and they had so many other opportunities throughout that control map to just hop on the B point, capture that point, win the round, take it to a round 5 where they probably would have won. And if that happens, now it's a 1-2 ball game. They can go into the hard point, which is their best mode. They can even it up 2-2, and who knows what happens in the Search and Destroy. But I just couldn't believe the blunder that I saw in that control. Again, I covered it front to back as thorough as I could possibly be. So go check that out if you haven't already. Last matchup, of course, is this final between Atlanta and Dallas. And I think it's probably what we expected. I almost thought off the rip that it might have been a hot 5-0. I thought that Atlanta was basically just going to take care of them. And Dallas did show a little bit in terms of signs of life. It wasn't a ton, but they didn't get completely blown out, even though it was a 5-2 finish. But overall, what can you say about Atlanta, right? I mean, they're so good, whether it's Respawn, Hardpoint, Control, what they're great at, which we're going to see in power rankings here in just a little bit, is they're so good at search and destroy, and they always clutch up. If you're in a 1v2 or they're in a 1v1, they always wins their ones. They always clutch up and win those rounds of search. And what else can you say? I mean, they were absolutely dominant. I called it on the Rotation podcast on Minnesota Rockers YouTube channel. Basically, I think you see SIMP shooting some bodies right there. I think they were trying to watch SIMP peek out right here. I think they were trying to bait Crim right here because they wanted to assassinate him for the last kill. But everybody on the Rotation podcast, Lando was on the episode that we called that Kingdom. Everybody picked Atlanta to win this tournament, and they're just playing super well right now. There's nothing else that you can say, whether it's Respawn, Hardpoint, Control, absolutely in search and destroy. They're just playing out of their minds, and I don't really know what you do to beat them at the moment. I thought Chicago did a really great job. That was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, beating them in essentially all of the respawns outside of one of them. But when it came down to search, Chicago is not on their level in search. They have shown at times that they can get beaten in a respawn here or there. But if you're going to go ahead and go up against Atlanta in a major final or even in the regular season, it doesn't even really matter when, you absolutely have to be on your game in every single one of those game modes, because even if they're down for 1 or 2 game modes, you can guarantee that they're not going to stay down throughout the entirety of a matchup. So Atlanta was just better, and what can you say? They're lights out at search, and we're going to talk about the format a little bit later in that best of 9, how the team that comes from winner's bracket doesn't have an advantage, and how in that best of 9 you end up playing four search and destroys. Again, there's a question about that inside the Twitter Q&A section that we're going to do later. As we move into this graphic, our top 5 players, I'm going to start over at the right with our 5th best player, and I have right now Diamond Khan. So, I mean, when you get a squad like New York that goes on the run that they went on, there has to be surprise players that are responsible for that. And of course you have Clay, but kind of the sidekick to Clay this weekend, it was Diamond Khan, and he was the biggest reason why they were able to go on that run and get a massive 3-0 victory over Chicago, because he just went absolutely off when it came to that control. He made play after play in both the hardpoint and the search before that. I just think going in, if you go back 3 weeks from now, you're thinking, what's going to happen with this New York squad, right? Like, you have so many things changing. Zuma is a great player, and you thought losing him, they were really going to be in trouble. And then Diamond Khan comes in and he just plays lights out, and he had a fantastic weekend. Had like a 1.3 plus in that matchup against Chicago. So to be a rookie, to get called up, to be in a massive environment like that, a massive match, and to do it against the green wall, that's deserving of being one of our top 5 standouts from the first major. So we've got Diamond Khan up there, which takes us to number 4, which is Huke. And right now, I think Huke is probably the best player in the game. I think on this list, you could put him at 1, you could put him at 5, you could put him anywhere on this list, and I wouldn't have an argument whatsoever. But you cannot make this list and not throw Huke in there. I think at times when it comes to the Dallas roster, we've seen Illy be good and we've seen Illy not be good. And same thing with Shotzzy, right? We've seen maps and modes where Shotzzy absolutely goes off and the dude fries and he looks like the same MVP that he was last year. And we've seen him not look like that. One person you cannot say that for is Huke. Match in, match out, whether it was opening week or super week or the first major, it doesn't matter. Huke has been playing unbelievably well. I think right now he's probably the MVP at this point. Simp might have something to say about that. Abizi might have something to say about that. But right now, I just think Hugh is playing unbelievably well. If you put him at number 1 on this list, I would not have any gripes about it whatsoever because he's just been playing unbelievable. He's the biggest reason why their team is getting big victories over teams like Chicago when they get in matchups like that. But ultimately, the combination of Simp, Abizi, Celium, Arces is just too much at this point in time. So there's only so much that he could do. So right now we've got Hugh at number 4, which takes us to our number 3 player, Clayster. So we have Diamond Con, we have Clay both on here. I think if you take Clayster off that New York roster and you put anybody else in there, any other player, I don't think New York has the type of success that we're currently seeing them have. It is literally just the Clayster effect. This is what this guy does, whether it's back with E United and what he did bringing in Simp and Abizi as rookies, or last year with Shotzi and Illy bringing those guys in as rookies. He just, at this point in time in his career, not only is he absolutely frying, he's one of the top ARs hands down, but he's continuing to motivate his teammates and mold them into players that believe. That match that we just saw them play previously against Minnesota Rocker, where they 3-0'd them to basically guarantee themselves starting in the winner's bracket in the first major. The biggest reason why they won that matchup against Minnesota was because Clayster came out and those dudes were playing aggressive and they were playing like they belong. He had Asim and Diamond Con and Mac playing with an aggression that I don't think Minnesota was prepared for, and they just came out and they just smacked him in the mouth, and that is all having to do with Clay. Now, their coaching staff and Zuma still being a big part of the org, sure, that has a ton to do with it, but when a map's over and they get a big victory, you look at Clay, he is hyping people up, and that's what you expect from him. So we've got Clay at number 3, and I'm just going to do number 2 and number 1 together because these can go hand in hand. But right now, I've got Abizi and Simp as number 1 and 2, and these guys are just absolute menaces on the map. They're called the Tiny Terrors for a reason. Right now, I think 1,000% Simp is the best player in the league. Like, I know I kind of said that about Hugh, but when I think about everything that Simp does, the leadership, the calls, so the in-game calls that he makes, whether he's got an AR or an SMG in his hands, whether it's search or whether it's hardpoint, this is a guy that you heard it from Arcides in a post-game interview when Lottie asked him, or maybe it was Jess, Lottie or Jess, one of them asked him, they were like, what are you doing this year and how are you bringing a change in leadership? And he sits back and he goes, my teammates are nasty. Like, I'm just going to keep it real with you. You know, everybody can talk about how adding me to this squad and making me the in-game leader and how that's going to make a big change for Atlanta. But ultimately, these guys are just disgusting players, and there's not much you have to do from a main AR perspective when you got those two and Celium playing the way that they're playing. So Abizi, just the plays that he makes overall in Search and Destroy and the First Bloods and the 1v2s that Simp ends up coming through with. We're actually going to take a peek here in the film room in just a second at a massive play that Simp ended up making. But overall, I don't know what to say. I mean, these guys are just playing absolutely out of their mind. And until somebody can step up and play at the same level that those two are, I don't know how you beat them. Because I think Dashy and Formal could probably hang with Celium and Arcides. I think Illy, when he's playing well in Crim, could probably hang. Definitely Awakening and Skies could hang. But name an SMG tandem that's going to end up hanging with those two, because I'm not sure I see it happening. So right now, my two top players from that first major, I've got Simp and Abizi. In the comments down below, did I miss anybody? Because I thought about Envoy. I thought about Dashy. I definitely thought about, Shotzi had times where he absolutely popped off. But this is my top 5. In the comments down below, would you have added anybody else? Maybe Awakening, who was a little bit responsible for their mini run that they went on. Let me know down in the comments, which brings us to our next session where we're diving into the film room. So welcome in, everybody, as we go ahead and get ready to play this from the film room. This play was from the Search and Destroy. You can see top middle. This is during that best of 9 between Dallas and Atlanta. And it seems like basically this entire matchup, when it came to Search and Destroy, I don't know who, first of all, I don't know who wins a best of 9 against Atlanta right now, because you have to win 4 Search and Destroys. I just don't see it happening. If Dallas can't do it, maybe Minnesota could maybe take a Search and Destroy or 2. I just don't see who's going to win that many Search and Destroys off of Atlanta. But as I was watching this, I wanted to kind of pick out a play that you don't see from a lot of other teams and just break it down and show you guys why it's so special and how it just completely just rips momentum away from a squad. So right now, top of your screen, this is for the entire tournament, right? This is map, what is this? Map 7. And if Atlanta wins this, it's over. But right now, it's 1 round to 1 round. So let's go ahead. Let's press play. And as we're watching this here,
close that out as well.
You're going to see this is the first place that I want to stop it. So you saw Crim 6 go mid, and he just peeked on the right side of Zigzag, but he couldn't go all the way out because they threw a nade there. So what that nade allowed them to do is it allowed Atlanta to get control of mid-map. And just when you think, okay, Atlanta's up 4 maps to 2. They might play a little bit passive just to guarantee that they get a victory. They come out, it's 1-1. The game's on the line. They throw that nade, they overtake mid-map. So just for a second here, let's go ahead. Let's bring up our mini-map. And as we look at this, of course, now we have the hard point map up, but it's search. There's one bomb site right here. The other bomb site's towards the top of the map. The normal, usual setup is to have somebody over here or going over towards Tiki just to kind of watch the push on the pool side of the map. You're also going to have somebody going over towards Laundry or pushing up towards Van just to watch the push over towards P1 on the bottom side. And then where you want to go from here, it can vary a little bit, right? You can have one other person playing these mid stairs. You can have one person in kitchen watching this mid rush here. But either or, normally you don't get too many people that push out further than where they're at right now. But what you saw is you saw a BZ and Simp both come up off spawn, get to kitchen, and as soon as they got here, they took and they lobbed a nade right here into Zigzag. And essentially what they did there is as Crim 6 came up off of spawn, he was probably going to peek mid and challenge this. But since they threw that double nade, he could not do that. So he ended up stopping short of Zigzag, which left the entire middle of the map open. So just because of that, something super simple that allowed the two of them to work forward and take control of mid-map. And now, if you lose control of mid-map on raid, search, and destroy, it really does hinder what you can do moving forward. Because let's just say, let me get rid of some of this, but let's just say Dallas is going to come down here. They're going to try to make a push towards this bomb site on over towards P1. Now, if they do that and say they get one down or something, but they have somebody mid-map, they can go back through Arch or they can peek through blinders, which might be a little bit risky, but either or, they can reverse path and they can come here to mid-map and they can get control of these mid-stairs and they can start to push this bomb site over here. But what happens when you end up losing mid-map to Simp and Abizi and they push through, now you can't do that, right? This entire area of the map is now enemy territory. So if you decide crap, we're kind of pinned down over here towards P1. We cannot make it to this bomb site. They have no other option but to go all the way back through their spawn. And if they go through their spawn, now once they get pushed up here, they have to worry about all the different lines of sight from outside Tiki, from inside Tiki, from over here towards basketball, from cutout, from mid-map. I mean, there's a major choke point right there, and it's really tough to do. So what happens is SIMP ends up going mid. They get a call out over towards P1 that there are people injured, there are people wounded, and we're going to watch and see what happens here. So as we go back, we're going to pick up where we left off. You can see that Crim doesn't end up pushing forward. Abizi immediately makes this hit, and at this point in time, he's being watched from behind, right? Look at these arrows down in the bottom left. As we're looking at this, SIMP is now right here. So SIMP is posted up right here watching the push while he's at this point in time letting Abizi push through and trying to get the kills here. So right now, SIMP realizes, hey, Abizi, go be just the absolute monster on the map that you are. I'll watch your back. You go do your thing. As we go back, Abizi comes forward. He's not quite able to finish those kills, right? He gets taken out by Shotzi, but what this does do is it gives Atlanta intel, because right now Abizi's looking at this and he's calling out to his team that there's 3 there. There's 3 inside ring, so there's only one other that you have to watch for. And they know where that 4th player is too, right? Because Crim6 was just peeking mid. So when Crim peeked and shot mid, now they know that 3 are over towards ring and Crim6 is mid-map. So what are you going to see? SIMP comes up. They're not going to expect another person to be there. A lot of times you don't expect one person to be there towards blinders, towards mid-map. SIMP comes through, gets the immediate, basically collateral on Shotzi and Huke. He knows that Illy is also there. These are just, now, you see that little slide cancel forward? He could have just stayed back, but he knows that Crim6 is mid. Just the tiniest of decisions. He goes forward, gets the slide cancel. He knows where Illy's at. He hits his shots perfectly, and you can see now that he's peeking towards Art because he knows where Crim's at. So if Crim is not peeking him from bottom Art or top Art, then he can go back and he can look towards mid. He immediately knows where everybody's at. He slide cancels forward, gets the 3rd, turns back. He watches towards Crim, and at this point in time, Crim's the last alive. He does end up trading him out, but it's now a 1v2, and this is basically impossible for them to win from here, right? So I just wanted to, I'm not going to watch this play out because we know what happens. It's an absolute beatdown, but I wanted to point that out just because those are things that might be, well, what the heck? It's 15 seconds into a search and destroy round, and we've already got SIMP getting a 3-piece, and what the heck happened? How did it happen? Those are the mistakes that Atlanta makes time and time again. Or not the mistakes. Those are the plays that Atlanta makes time and time again. If you're Dallas, you can't say, it's not like they did anything wrong. They looked mid, they got the kill. Okay, usually if ever, there's only one person there, and it just so happens that immediately SIMP comes through, gets the trade, gets 2 more, and it's plays like that are really easy to overlook, but SIMP played it beautifully. Every split frame, he was gathering more and more information based off of where people are. So that's the episode of the Film Room. Down in the comments, do you think that we should have had other things in here? Are there other plays that maybe you want to see on next week's episode where we include the Film Room? So down in the comments, leave that there. But without further ado, we're going to move on to the next stage. Now, at this point in time, they have got to pick who ends up going where. So the way that this works is you have the 2 groups that are, or the 2 teams that were in the finals will end up picking who goes in each group, and it'll just continue on from there. So as we have it right now, it's the same 2 teams that picked the original group, but Atlanta won, so Atlanta will go first and Dallas will go second. So obviously right now, if I'm starting as Atlanta, I don't want to see Optic. So I'm going to take Optic. I'm going to put them over here in Group B. That's the first team that I'm going to move out. And after that, now this is where things get a little bit tricky, because if you're Dallas, now you have to pick a team to put over in Atlanta's group. So the last time we did this, it was LA Thieves. LA Thieves was the next team off the board. But if I'm looking at this overall, New York has absolutely everything it takes to beat anybody in the league. So New York is also there. You have Minnesota, who you probably wouldn't put up that high. So right now, for me, it's between LA and New York. And if I'm Dallas right now, I mean, this is tough. I don't even know where you go from here, but I would probably put New York over here. And the reason why I would put New York over there is because Dallas has shown towards the end of the year in that final matchup that they can handle LA Thieves. And when it came to them playing New York, it was just a little bit tighter. And I think with how New York continues to improve, that's a team that I 1,000% do not want to see. Take them, put them somewhere else. I don't want to see them again ever. So I think Dallas goes ahead and puts New York over on the left-hand side, which now we just continue down the teams that were picked. So the next team is going to be Optic. If I'm Optic, at this point, I'm going to take LA Thieves, and I'm going to put them over here also. So no matter which way you looked at it, Atlanta was going to end up getting both those teams after they took Chicago and put them over to the right. Now, from here, you have New York. So New York's making a decision, and I think at this point, the next highest teams, you have Florida, you have Minnesota, and then you have Toronto, right? Those are probably that next group of teams. And I got to be honest with you, if I'm New York, at this point, I probably don't want to see Florida. I think the performances that they had throughout the major, going into the major, they stumbled. They did not look great. They did not look like the team that everybody thought they were going to be. But skies started to catch fire, and Awakening started to play well, and Neptune and Slack came along. I just think right now that's another team that I don't want to see. I think they have the ability to upset basically anybody that stands in their path outside of maybe Atlanta. So if I'm New York, I'm putting Florida on the other side, which takes us to our next team, which would be LA Thieves. They were the next one selected. And again, if I'm LA, at this point, I probably take Minnesota and put them over to the right. I really think that eventually Minnesota is going to figure it out in hardpoint. And when they do, they're one of the best search teams. They're one of the best control teams. So once they get it figured out, watch out. So I have Minnesota over on the right. From there, Florida was the next team selected. So my guess would be that Ultra would go over towards the left. And then from here, you have to decide the next pick would be Minnesota's pick. So joining Toronto over on the left, I'm not sure there's much of a difference outside of these three squads. Based off of performances in the major, you might see LAG, or you might say put LAG over there. But Paris has also shown, especially in that matchup with Atlanta and the victory they earned over Toronto, that you don't want to see Paris either. So right now, if I'm Minnesota, I'm probably, with how good Paris is in respawns, I'm going to take Paris and I'm going to put them over here in Group A. I just think, again, if I'm thinking about Minnesota, who can we beat in search, and then who can we take a respawn off of? Paris was winning respawns and playing really tight respawns against Atlanta. So if they're doing that against Atlanta, I don't want to see them anywhere near me. So I have Paris over in the left. Now, if you're Toronto, Toronto was the next team that was picked. You got to pick somebody to go over to Group B. And at this point, it's probably hoods up. You're probably taking LAG over on the right, which from here, we have 5 teams in each. Paris was next, you're going to go ahead. You're going to put Seattle over in Group B. And then they're going to take London will be the last team picked. So this is how I see it breaking down. I would be shocked if you see much that's different from this. And if you look at the groups overall, I mean, which one do you if you had to pick a group to be in, I think 1 through 4, Group B is probably better. When you have these two teams, which absolutely have the potential, Dallas and Optic, to come out and win a major, then you have you have Florida that's popping off. You have Minnesota, who can beat anybody, as they've already shown that they can go ahead and beat Dallas like they did because they're so good at search. Whereas when I look across, Atlanta obviously is probably going to be an L for anybody. But after that, I think New York is beatable. LA is beatable. Toronto is beatable. So if I'm looking at this, sure, New York is hot right now, but who knows if that continues. LA has question marks. Toronto has question marks. I mean, if I'm Paris or if I'm Toronto and I'm sitting in Group A, and if this is how it ends up working out, I would be pretty happy because you avoid Dallas, you avoid Optic, you avoid a streaking hot Florida team. We'll see what happens. Down in the comments, let me know. Do you think Group A, Group B is better? Do you think that there are some teams that might be mixed up? Let me know, which ultimately brings us to our final session. If you're not following me on Twitter, make sure you go do so. It's at IconNationYT, exactly how you see it on screen in the bottom left, just a YT after that, because I went and I asked some questions to Twitter. So let's go ahead and let's bring up our Twitter Q&A. I picked 6 questions from Twitter. If you're somebody that asked a question, thank you so much for doing so. If I didn't pick your question or if I didn't get your question in time before I got to this filming, I'll put out another question next week. Make sure you're following me at IconNationYT, and we'll get them answered for it. You can see it right here in the middle of your screen at IconNationYT. So first of all, this one comes from Asem, which says that best of 9 is boring from a viewer's point of view. I need your opinion. Will Atlanta FaZe always be the favorite to win this format, even if they come from losers? So 2 issues. First issue overall is that if you come from winner's bracket, you should start with a 1-0 advantage. So let's just say, for whatever reason, that Optic Chicago comes from winners and Atlanta comes from losers. If that's the case, you still have to play 4 S&Ds, right? And the vast majority of those are going to end up favoring Atlanta. So if I'm going into this matchup, I really think that whoever comes from winners should start with a 1-0 advantage. It just makes sense to me that if you come from winners and you haven't lost the entire tournament, how do you not have an advantage? Back in the CWL, in that instance, if you came from losers, you would have to win 2 best-of-5s over the representative from winners. And in this one, there's no advantage anywhere. So I don't love that. So that's probably my first issue. The second issue is that I don't hate that there's 4 search and destroys. I just think at this point in time, I don't know how you beat Atlanta. I said it multiple times throughout this video. If you've got multiple search and destroys, 4 of them in a best of 9, I don't see how it happens. Plus, Atlanta's so good at search, and they're so good at hardpoint, and they're so good at control. Where are you going to find 5 different victories against that team? I'm just not sure how it happens. So that's my take there. I don't think it's boring per se. I do think that 2 best-of-5s would probably add a little bit more excitement, and it wouldn't feel like such a long series that halfway through you might think, man, I'm getting hungry. Let me go get some food, and I'll come back, and there'll still be matches going on. So I get where it's coming from, but that's my take. Next question comes from The Real Straits that says, I know you've got links to the Rocker side of things, because of the co-stream and the podcast and everything I do with Minnesota. If you're not watching that, before every Minnesota match, we do a co-stream every Tuesday night on Rocker YouTube. We also do a podcast called The Rotation. We had Lando on last week. We'll see who the guests are moving forward. Go follow us over there if you're not already. He says, but I'm wondering if you have any ideas on what the team needs to sort out its respawn because it's really held them back so far. And yeah, this is just one of those things where they're not holding rotations when they have rotations. They're not winning rotations. They're just not at this point in time winning those clutch gun battles. And I think it's probably in their head a little bit because if you think about some of the other game modes, they 1,000% clutch up in Search and Destroy. I mean, they're one of the most clutch teams in Search that we have in the COD League. So the problem isn't that they don't know how to clutch up because they're doing it in Search and they're also doing it in Control. They're a top Control team. So when it comes to Minnesota, if you're clutching up and you're making the plays in Search and Destroy and you're clutching up and you're making the plays in Control, why isn't it coming through and why isn't it happening in Hardpoint? It's just one or two things here or there. They're not holding rotations or they're not paying 1,000% attention in terms of when they should be watching flanks and trying to win rotations. I really think it's just little things here and there. As soon as they start to rattle off a couple hard points in a row, I think it'll be a non-story and they'll end up being fine. But from right now, I think it's just make sure you're paying attention to the details, holding down all of the routes, clutching up, making plays when you need to be making plays, trading out, if teams are rushing through the front of P2 on Raid and Kitchen, make sure you're trading that out, or it's just little things here or there. I trust that they're watching VODs. They're going to get better. They're going to end up learning from it. So that's my take there. Ricky comes through and says, in your experience, New York Subliners' performance could be sustained throughout the season. You have one rookie, one sophomore, and a seam. Is Optic? So that's the first question. I think absolutely New York is a squad that's just going to continue to get better as the year goes on. That's what Clay has shown on the last two rosters that he was on. I don't see why it changes now. So 1,000%, I think that they're just going to continue to get better. Will they clutch up and win all of those matches that they've been winning? Probably not consistently, but I don't think they're going to regress. That is not what a Clayster-led team does. Then the second part of this says, is Optic lost due to a cocky attitude or they have problems in their gameplay? No, I just think So when you're thinking about the loss they had in New York, they came out, they got smacked in the mouth, but they did recover, and there's no reason why they should have lost that control. I just think that they might have been playing a little bit too passively, and the fact that they played too passive in that control ended up leading to their downfall and ultimately that 0-3 loss, which knocked them out of that tournament. I think that I don't know. I was a little bit shocked to see them almost have control of B, and then they backed off and they played it passively, and then they were no longer the aggressors. I think that they're just one of those squads that have to remember and say to themselves, we're freaking Optic. When we have an opportunity to put our, to really just take somebody out, we have got to do it. And I don't think they had that mentality against New York, and it came back to bite them. So I don't think they have any problems. I think they have to continue to watch, Search and Destroy VODs and learn from other teams and stuff like that. But I think that they're fine. They're going to figure it out. They're still the third best team in the league. So don't hit the panic button yet. They're still going to get there. They're fine. Next, we have from Smudger that says, Paris have far surpassed people's expectations so far. Do you reckon they have the potential to continue to improve and impress, or have they reached their ceiling? I think Paris is very similar to New York. I think they're just starting to hit their stride. If you listen to Scraps when he was on the Eavesdrop podcast, he said that they came together late. He had this 14-day period where he flew to Mexico before he could get into the United States, and all he could do at that point in time is just watch Scump and Optic play scrims. And at that point, They weren't getting better. They weren't gelling with their teammates. They weren't building team chemistry and different strategies and stuff like that. It made it sound very clear that they're a team that's in it for the right reasons. They're going to work their absolute tails off, and they're just going to continue to get better over time. So right now, I think that they hit a little bit of a hiccup when it came to the first stage major. But I think as time progresses, they're going to continue to work hard. They've got absolutely have the talent to do so. They have the leadership from Scraps and Classic. I think that's probably a team that once the third major rolls around, you probably don't want to see that squad. So that's my take on Paris. I think they're probably just getting started. I don't think they're anywhere near their potential ceiling. Next question comes from Max that says, if you had to build the best roster possible, 1 main AR, 1 flex, and 2 SMGs, who would it be in your opinion? Are you ready for this? I would pick the Atlanta FaZe roster. It is what it is. I mean, name me 2 SMGs that you would want other than Simp and Abizi. Maybe you substitute Huke in there, but are you going to take Abizi out, who makes all sorts of first bloods and is, I don't want to say mainly responsible, but in large part responsible for why they're so good at search? Are you going to take him out? Probably not. Are you going to take Simp out? Absolutely not. So those are the 2 SMGs that I'm going to roll with. When it comes to flex, Celium has been playing unbelievable. Celium's just the unsung hero of that squad. Every time I see Celium play, it just seems like people are counting him out, thinking, okay, there's Celium. Okay, you have these super stud SMGs and main AR, and Celium's just there. Maybe you could make a case for replacing Celium with Dashy because Dashy has been playing unbelievable. But if I'm forced to have Celium as my flex, by all means, I think any team in the league outside of maybe Optic would make that trade in a heartbeat. And then when it comes to Arcities, I don't know if you could name me a main AR that's playing better right now. I mean, Formal has at times, but not consistently. Crim6 absolutely has not played with the consistency that Arcities has. Maybe you take Skies in that scenario because Skies is an absolute madman. I mean, if you put Skies on that Atlanta roster, do they get better or do they lose some because of the IGL, the in-game leadership from Arcities? I just think if I had to build the best roster, I'm not sure outside of maybe Huke or Dashy or Skies or maybe Envoy. I don't know who you replace off of that Atlanta roster. So that would be my take there. Last but not least, Dr. Fuss 111 says, what percentage, and I love this question. This is a great question out of him. What percentage of variance do you think there is between online and LAN? Say we've done 10 events since being online. How many winners are different if it were LAN? And whose stock goes up the most if it's on LAN? I love this question because you know what probably doesn't happen if this is on LAN? DiamondCon probably doesn't play that well in that scenario. He's at home in front of the setup he plays at all the time. You don't have the live crowd and you don't have, the spotlights and the main stage and all the noise, and you don't have that when you're playing from your home setup or from an office. It's different. It really does impact those players a ton. So when it comes to the winners though, I don't think no matter where it was at, I don't think that changes the fact that Atlanta wins this first major. We saw last year, too, Shotzi struggle a little bit at the beginning of the year, and eventually he figured it out. So would there be some different winners? Right now, I don't think anybody's beating Atlanta, but that's what makes Scump Informal, is that when the lights are the brightest and there's an audience and the stage is the biggest and the audience is the loudest, that's when those two specifically play their absolute best. So I think they probably don't get upset by New York. they probably have a pretty close matchup against Dallas, and then they probably get mopped by Atlanta right now. But I do think if it were on land, Chicago's probably a squad that could go up and they could challenge Atlanta just because of all the things that come into play. So whose stock goes up the most? I think Optics absolutely goes up the most. I think you probably don't see so many plays from like the rookies or almost rookies, the sophomores that are on Toronto. You don't see the same amount of plays from the rookies or the sophomores that are on New York. It's just, it's a much more high stakes environment, and I'm just not sure you get the same sort of output from those players that are brand new to the league. I think Scump and Formal and Krim and those guys that have been in those scenarios a ton, I think you see a little bit more performance out of them. So I don't think it changes the fact that Atlanta won, but I do think it would change the route of some of those matches throughout the losers bracket. So with that, we're here to final thoughts. Thank you guys so much for all of the questions on Twitter. If you're new, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you're here for every single episode. And the tagline down below says, how do we spend our week off? So we now have a weekend off. We don't see live CDL action for another basically 2 entire weeks. So hopefully this is an opportunity to enjoy the changing weather. I'm in the Midwest. It's like 55 degrees today, so take some time, enjoy the weather, be with your family and friends. Hopefully these players are also stepping away for a little bit, traveling back home, or just taking a mini kind of vacation, stepping away from the game, because in about a week and a half, we're going to have week 1 of the next stage, and it's going to be go time from there, right? You have week 1, week 2, week 3, and then the major. So it's very much so a month straight of Call of Duty. So enjoy this next week and a half off. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you're new, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also, turn on that notification bell, because I've been going live after some of these big matchups and doing live VOD breakdowns on Twitter or on right here on YouTube. You guys have really been enjoying those. I think the last one had like 6,000 viewers, so make sure you hit that bell so you're notified when I go live. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you guys being here for another episode of the OE. We will see you in next week's episode.